Assalamu alaikum. Imagine for a moment that you are in a society where premarital relationships are governed by strict rules, where every interaction between men and women is a question of respect and purity. But then, why does this question persist in modern discussions? Do Christians have to be friends before dating? This is a question that raises many debates, especially when we seek to answer it from the angle of Islam. Does Islam, which values modesty and integrity, have a place for friendship before a serious romantic relationship? Or is it a slippery slope that can lead to temptation? In this article, we will explore this fascinating question, unveiling the Islamic principles that govern relationships, while providing a fresh perspective on current cultural and social practices. Stay with us to find out what Islam thinks about this, and why it might change the way you think about premarital relationships. 1. The question of friendship before marriage. An Islamic perspective. One of the questions frequently raised, especially in discussions about relationships between men and women, is whether a friendship between the two sexes is possible before thinking about marriage. In many contemporary societies, the concepts of friendship and romantic relationship are often mixed, and a purely platonic friendship between a man and a woman sometimes seems inevitable. However, from an Islamic point of view, the issue deserves deeper reflection because it touches on fundamental principles of modesty, preservation of the integrity of the heart and faith. Islam places great importance on how relationships between men and women are managed. The ultimate goal is to preserve purity of intentions and not expose oneself to situations that might arouse desires or emotions that deviate from God's way. Interactions between men and women are not prohibited in Islam, but they are strictly regulated. They must be guided by pure intentions and be done within a framework respectful of Islamic values, in order to avoid falling into behaviors that could harm faith and spirituality. One of the first things to understand here is that Islam does not prohibit meeting or communication between men and women, but it does impose limits. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, advised not to find yourself alone in situations where temptation could arise. The principles of modesty and mutual respect are therefore crucial for any interaction between the sexes. A friendship between a man and a woman, according to Islamic teachings, should not exceed certain limits and should not evolve into something more intimate, such as an unregulated romantic relationship. The major problem with the idea of premarital friendship is that often what begins as a friendly, no-nonsense relationship can slowly evolve into a feeling of emotional attachment. This feeling, even if it begins innocently, can eventually lead to physical and emotional desires that have no place in a relationship that is not intended to be a marriage. Islam warns us against becoming emotionally attached to someone before marriage is considered, as this can cause confusion and harm the purity of intention. From this perspective, the idea of friendship between a man and a woman, as it is sometimes perceived in secular societies, is not completely compatible with the principles of Islam. Islam teaches us to be prudent and to keep our social relationships within a framework that respects the laws of God. When two people meet with the intention of marriage, it is important that they know their boundaries and act with clarity of intention. Conversations and interactions should be transparent, respectful, and free of any ambiguity that could arouse uncontrolled emotions. Relationships before marriage, according to Islam, should never be based on emotional or physical desires. A friendship, as it is often understood in non-religious societies, could easily become fertile ground for such desires. Islam prefers that relationships between men and women be built on solid foundations, such as respect, clarity of intentions, and the ultimate goal of marriage. It is best not to pursue a friendship that might distract from the true purpose of the relationship, which is to establish a lifelong partnership based on commitment and faith. Thus, although Islam does not reject the idea of social interactions between men and women, it is cautioned against situations where these relationships can become unclear or ambiguous. The real test of this question is not simply whether friendship can exist before marriage, but whether it can be demonstrated in a way that upholds Islamic principles. In a relationship that aims for marriage, it is crucial that both individuals respect boundaries and act according to the moral and spiritual values that will guide their life together in the future. The need for a clear intention for a serious relationship. Islam, in all its wisdom, teaches us that every action must be guided by a pure intention, a niyyah. This notion of intention is not just a theoretical concept, but a fundamental principle that governs every aspect of our lives, including our human relationships. When we enter into a relationship, whether friendly, professional, or romantic, the question of intention always arises. Why do we act this way? What is the but behind our interactions? In modern culture, it is common to establish friendships with people without having a specific plan in mind. But Islam invites us to think deeply before committing to a relationship, even a friendship. Indeed, any relationship must have a clear and noble intention, especially when two people of opposite sexes interact. If this intention is not set, then expectations and desires are likely to become blurred, which could lead to complications or disappointments. Let's imagine a situation where a person enters an interaction with unclear intent. For example, two individuals begin to hang out, talk to each other, exchange thoughts and emotions, but without asking the question, why are we doing this? What are our deep intentions? Very often, without a clear intention, we find ourselves caught in a whirlwind of emotions that are neither controlled nor directed towards a constructive goal. This can result in feelings that are not aligned with the purity of the soul, or even desires that do not respect the Islamic principles of modesty and chastity. In the Islamic context, this lack of precise intention can also lead to misdirection. Friendship, which should be a respectful and constructive interaction, can turn into something more intimate and dangerous. If a person starts getting close to an individual without a specific goal, they risk finding themselves in a relationship that has no solid foundation other than emotional or physical attraction, which can create an unhealthy dependency. Intention, therefore, becomes a real shield. In Islam, we are encouraged to set an intention from the start that is clear and right. If two people meet with the idea of getting to know each other with a view to marriage, then their interactions take a serious and respectful direction. The intention becomes a spiritual and moral guide that directs their actions, words, and thoughts towards a noble goal, that of establishing a home based on love and devotion. This does not mean that meetings should be cold or devoid of human warmth, quite the contrary. But Islam reminds us that when we interact with a person of the opposite sex, it is crucial to define that interaction within a well-defined framework. The intention of a serious relationship makes all the difference. It transforms what could be a superficial exchange into something deep, meaningful, and pure. Interactions then become marked by respect, sincerity, and a common commitment towards a moral and spiritual objective. The absence of clear intention opens the door to going astray. Conversely, when a person acts with pure intention, every gesture, every word becomes a means of deepening the relationship in a way that is respectful and aligned with Islamic teachings. This helps prevent temptations and keeps one's heart away from desires that could benefit one's soul. So to avoid the pitfalls of confusion and disappointment, it is essential to think about your intentions before entering into any form of relationship. A pure and clear intention is the foundation of any sincere relationship, whether it is a friendship, a meeting, or even a future marriage. This principle helps us keep our hearts pure and guide our actions towards what is beneficial and consistent with the values of Islam. In a world where uncertainty and superficiality can sometimes dominate, intention is our compass, our spiritual guide, which allows us to remain faithful to our faith while interacting with respect and integrity. 3. The separation between friendship and romantic relationship in Islam. In Islam, the principles that govern relationships between men and women are strict and designed to protect the individual from temptation and maintain purity of heart. A frequently asked question is whether one can maintain a friendship before entering into a romantic relationship. What may seem like simple friendship in other cultures is often seen in a different light in Islam. It is important to understand that Islam makes a clear distinction between what is considered a friendship and what could develop into a romantic relationship. A friendship, in the traditional sense where two people of the opposite sex meet to discuss, share moments of complicity and emotion without any specificity, is dangerous territory. This kind of interaction can gradually develop into something more intense, even romantic attraction. The line between a simple friendly interaction and the emergence of romantic feelings is thin. This is why, in Islam, relationships must always be guided by clear intentions and respect for certain boundaries. Human feelings are powerful and can often develop unconsciously. What starts as light conversation or a shared activity can, over time, turn into an emotional dependence. And it is in this process that Islam warns us. Islam does not condemn emotions in themselves, but it tells us that when these emotions mix with behaviors or thoughts that are outside of permissible limits, they can quickly become a source of temptation and inner disturbance. Therefore, friendship between men and women, without a clear vision of its purpose, can easily slip into morally risky territory. Let's take a concrete example. Two people meet regularly to discuss, share ideas, and spend time together. At first, everything seems innocent, almost like pure friendship. But little by little, one of the two begins to feel stronger emotions. The other, who had no intention of getting carried away by feelings, also begins to find himself attracted to the person. These emerging emotions disrupt their hearts and their actions, which are no longer guided by principles of purity. They then find themselves faced with a situation where they must choose between temptation and preserving their faith. This is where Islam steps in to remind us that the clear separation between friendship and romantic relationships is essential. Islam does not seek to prohibit human interactions, but rather to channel them within respectful and protective boundaries. The goal is not to isolate us from others, but to guide us toward relationships that are in harmony with our spiritual and moral values. There is a path forward that allows us to preserve our feelings while still upholding the standards of our faith. Meetings between men and women must have a clear purpose, centered on a serious commitment to getting to know each other with a view to marriage. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that when two people wish to marry, it is best for them to get to know each other in a respectful setting, while ensuring that the boundaries of modesty are not crossed. This contrasts with the idea of a casual friendship that has no specific goal and can easily turn into flirting or uncontrolled attachment. Thus, Islam encourages us to have relationships with a clear and pure intention, namely preparation for serious commitment. Friendship, as it is often defined in modern cultures, is not designed to exist between a man and a woman without a specific purpose. This does not mean that Islam prohibits all forms of communication between the sexes, but these interactions should be directed towards a healthy goal, away from superfluous desires and temptations. Islam calls us to protect our hearts, because it is from there that our actions take shape. A friendship that could develop into something more intimate is not a healthy relationship, according to Islamic principles. It is essential to remain vigilant, understand boundaries, and ensure that our intentions remain pure and consistent with the teachings of our faith. 4. Protection of the heart and emotions in relationships. In Islam, one of the most important principles regarding human relationships, and especially relationships between men and women, is the protection of the heart. The heart is seen as the seat of emotions and intentions. It is considered a part of the soul that, when protected, allows the individual to maintain spiritual and moral purity. It is therefore essential in the context of relationships between opposite sexes to understand that the heart must be preserved from temptations and emotional attachments which can divert the individual from the right path. Islam teaches us that love and emotions are divine gifts, but these feelings must be controlled. This does not mean that one should close oneself to natural human emotions, but rather that one should learn to manage them wisely and carefully. In the context of a friendly relationship between a man and a woman, emotions can evolve quickly, going from sincere affection to emotional dependence that disrupts the inner balance. This is where the need to protect yourself comes in, not only in terms of behavior, but also in terms of your heart. Let's take the example of a situation where a man and a woman, without a clear intention of getting married, find themselves spending time together, sharing deep conversations and moments of complicity. At first glance, this may seem innocent. However, these exchanges can gradually fuel emotions that are not controlled. This process can cause one or the other to become irreversibly attached to the other, creating inner confusion that can lead to impulsive decision or emotional disturbance. The heart, in this state, becomes vulnerable to desires that are not aligned with the tenets of Islam. Islam teaches us that we must always keep control of our emotions. Patience also calls for trust in God. While waiting for the right moment to meet the person who will become his life partner, the believer places his life and his choices in the hands of God, trusting that, in his infinite wisdom, he will guide his steps towards the best decision. Waiting then becomes a form of submission and trust, a deep faith that whatever happens at the right time will be what is best for us. Furthermore, Islam teaches us that rushing into relationships can lead to mistakes that affect not only our emotional well-being, but also our spirituality. By acting with patience, we allow the relationship to develop naturally, with a foundation of love, respect, and sincerity, far from external influences and social pressures. Thus, in a world where urgency and impulsiveness dominate, Islam offers us a path to inner tranquility and wisdom, patience. By waiting and following the natural rhythm of things, we preserve our hearts, we honor our values, and we prepare ourselves for a relationship that will be both fair, balanced, and deeply in harmony with our faith. Ultimately, Islam reminds us that relationships between men and women must be guided by clear principles and a deep respect for moral values. The idea of being friends before entering into a romantic relationship, while popular in some cultures, clashes with the Islamic view, which emphasizes clarity of intention and integrity. If you are looking to understand how to better navigate relationships within your faith, it is important to consider these principles and apply these teachings in your daily life. If this topic has interested you, and you would like to know more about the Islamic principles governing relationships, Do not hesitate to subscribe so as not to miss any of our discussions on similar themes. Also share your thoughts in the comments. How do you approach serious relationships in your life? We would love to hear your thoughts. Uncontrolled attachment can lead to a form of dependence that distracts the individual from their spiritual and moral priorities. This type of attachment can also create inner anxiety, as the individual finds themselves caught between conflicting feelings. On the one hand, they feel love or affection for the other, and on the other, they know that they must maintain clear boundaries, because these emotions are not in line with the path they seek to follow. To avoid this confusion and protect the heart, Islam recommends a series of behaviors and attitudes that help keep emotions in balance. One of the most effective ways to protect your heart is to maintain a relationship with the other sex that is always directed toward a specific goal, such as marriage. This allows you to stay focused and prevent uncontrolled emotions from taking over. A clear and defined relationship with respected boundaries protects both the emotions and the purity of the heart. In situations where intentions are unclear, Islam reminds us that the best way to keep our hearts pure is to distance ourselves from interactions that can cause uncontrolled feelings. This may seem difficult, especially in a society where relationships between men and women are often trivialized. But Islam invites us to consider purity of heart as a precious treasure. This treasure must be protected from outside influences, including emotions that are not aligned with spiritual goals. Islam does not reject the idea of a relationship between men and women, but it guides us towards practices that preserve our emotional and spiritual well-being. A sincere and respectful relationship, directed toward a clear goal like marriage, is one of the most effective ways to maintain balance of the heart. Additionally, entering into a relationship with pure, well-defined intentions builds a solid foundation on which trust, love, and respect can grow, without confusion or compromise on the core values of Islam. In conclusion, protecting the heart is essential to maintaining a healthy and balanced relationship. Islam teaches us that emotions should be guided by principles that bring us closer to our Creator, rather than turning us away from Him. Therefore, relationships should always be exercised within a respectful, clear, and intentional framework, thereby protecting the heart from the traps of excessive attachment and uncontrolled desires. 5. The path of patience and waiting in Islam. In a world where instant gratification has become the norm, Islam invites us to adopt another perspective on romantic relationships and meetings between men and women. Rather than giving in to haste and impulse, Islam teaches us the value of patience and waiting. This principle is essential not only to preserve purity of heart and intentions, but also to build a solid and respectful relationship based on solid foundations. When we talk about romantic relationships, especially the question of friendship before marriage, waiting becomes an act of faith and spiritual discipline. The temptation to act quickly, rush into a relationship, or follow one's desires without thinking about the consequences is pervasive in modern society. Movies, series, and social media constantly convey the idea that love must be immediate and infallible, which pushes us to seek immediate satisfaction. However, Islam teaches us to resist this pressure and take the time necessary to develop a sincere and respectful relationship, always with a clear goal. The concept of patience, or patience, is deeply rooted in Islamic teachings. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, emphasized that patience is a valuable virtue which, when cultivated, allows the individual to grow spiritually and maintain moral integrity. When we apply this patience in the context of romantic relationships, it means that we commit not to rush things, but to wait for the moment when serious commitment, such as marriage, becomes the natural setting for a relationship. Patience is not just passive waiting. It is an active waiting, guided by faith and discipline. This involves putting aside immediate desires and acting with respect, both for yourself and the other person. Rather than being carried away by attraction, desire, or temptation, Islam encourages us to step back and let things develop naturally. This approach creates a healthier, more respectful, and more stable relationship, because it is based on reflection and preparation rather than impulsiveness. Waiting and patience do not mean living in isolation or inaction. Rather, it means that we must keep our hearts pure, avoid unnecessary interactions, and guide our emotions toward goals that are in harmony with our spiritual values. A person who waits in Islam is one who actively engages in developing their inner qualities, strengthening their faith, and preparing for the time when, with pure intention, they are ready to engage in a serious relationship consistent with the path of marriage.